time.
timer.
Yeah, let's see how that
I have
goes.
5 minutes to explain 5 things about a fearless organization.
Okay. Ooh, I didn't know that there was like dramatic. Hi, everybody. I'm Danae, and I'm going to tell you 5 things about the Fearless Organization, which is fundamentally a book about building, that's creepy, about building happy, productive teams who can innovate through uncertainty. And the other thing it's about, which I'll talk you through in just a second, is about the concept of psychological safety. So the first thing that I kind of took away from this book that I thought was super interesting was that the highest performing teams report the most mistakes. So this book started by a woman at the Harvard Business School who was studying different teams and kind of what makes teams high performing teams. And she was studying medical teams in a hospital, different kind of nursing teams and things like that. And she was looking for a correlation between the number of mistakes that they made and whether or not they were like a successful high performing team. And she expected to find that the team with the lowest mistakes actually were the best performing teams. But instead, her data came back with the exact opposite. The teams that reported the most mistakes were the ones that were the most successful. And so she sat on this for a little while and then sent in a researcher to kind of go and figure out what was going on in those teams. And then she realized it wasn't that the team was making more mistakes. It was that the team actually felt safe talking about those mistakes and actually reporting them to someone else or to each other. And that was the critical difference. And that's what she's called psychological safety. And it's fundamentally the lack of interpersonal fear in a team to talk about mistakes, to talk about ideas, to basically just talk about stuff without feeling like you're going to get made fun of or you're going to get somehow like looked down on or punished or anything like that within a team. And this is really important because the other really big takeaway that I took from this book was that that's kind of how things work in a lot of businesses, that there isn't a lot of psychological safety. And fundamentally, I think this is because there's a mismatch between the way that we kind of learned about management and a lot of management theory that you kind of is still kicked about, especially kind of like the 90s feeling stuff, is all left over from basically like 19th century factory work, you know, when work was predictable and everything was really certain. And she introduced this concept called VUCA, and it's actually from the US Army, and it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's fundamentally the world that we all operate in business now. We live in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous business context, especially if we're working in startups that are trying to innovate, but even if we're working in more established businesses, we're really finding that nothing is predictable because markets keep changing, competitors keep coming in, people keep changing their behavior, new technology disrupts everything, but we keep trying to expect people to behave or to be able to predict what's going to happen next and to be consistent and predictable. And that's really, you know, treating knowledge workers who are being asked to innovate like factory workers, which doesn't make any sense. And that leads to a lot of lack of psychological safety because we're asking people to predict certainty and then feel bad when they've failed, when actually failure is kind of baked into the system. One of the other things I thought was super interesting was that psychological safety can't exist at the company level unless it's a really small company. Psychological safety fundamentally exists at a team level. So if you were sitting in a great company and you're thinking, great, this is a great place to work. If I was like, I'm in the leadership position at my company, I could look around and say, that's wonderful, everything's great here. But really you'd have to look team by team to see what's going on in order to really understand whether psychological safety is happening. And so some of the signs that you can look for is if people are saying like, it's not really worth it me saying anything, or if people are really reluctant to talk about an idea in front of their boss or without checking with their boss first, that's a really good sign of low psychological safety because they don't feel as if their boss actually gives them permission to make an opinion without checking it with them first. Or they might feel like, you know, actually if I do this, then I'm going to hear about it afterwards and it's just not worth it. Like that's low psychological safety. And obviously there's more kind of extreme examples of that as well. It might be that they admitted in a meeting that they didn't know how to do something, and then afterwards their boss comes to them, or one of their peers comes to them and says, well, why didn't you know how to do that? That would also be a good example of low psychological safety. So how do you build psychological safety? So the way that the book recommends to do it is, You don't have to do it as like as an executive in the company. Any team lead can build psychological safety, and any team member can build psychological safety. The important thing to do is set context first, and then talk about how urgent it is that feedback comes in. And that context that you need to set is actually about that VUCA, that volatility, that uncertainty that's going on. Because in the example of the medical team, what they did was they said, everything is moving all the time. Everything is chaotic all the time. The only way we're going to get through this is if we talk to each other about the mistakes that we're seeing, the problems that we're seeing, and if we raise them as early as we possibly can, and then we'll be able to kind of problem solve together, collaborate, and fix that problem. So they set the context that I'm nearly done. This doesn't have to be predictable. And that's a really important context to set when you're asking people to stick their neck out and say, I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know if this is okay. And that's urgent, because that's how you innovate through uncertainty. And every business now has to innovate through uncertainty. And then finally, just a really quick thing around 3 different types of failure. So she categorizes failures as preventable. So that's a factory line failure. Like there was a process, somebody forgot to do something, everything broke. Then there's complex failure. And that's when, there was a lot of different things going on. It was difficult to actually see all the different things that could have happened. And therefore something changed over here, which ended up changing something over here. And then there's intelligent failure. And that's the kind of failure that you do through experimentation. So you're trying to fail because you're trying to learn. And the real problem is that in a lot of organizations with low psychological safety, they treat complex failure like preventable failure to make people feel bad about anything that might not have gone well. And then they forget to really contextualize and try to aim for intelligent failure. So yeah, as a quick summary, the best teams talk about their mistakes without fear. Fear is the mind killer for knowledge workers. Low psychological safety can lurk in good companies. To build psychological safety, you want to normalize uncertainty by setting that context. And remember to not treat complex failures like preventable failures. Okay, that's me.
Thanks, Jane. That was awesome. We'll just round up with questions at the end. So if you've got any questions, just note them down and I'll try and remember them. So we welcome to the stage me. Hi. Yeah, the book that I'd like to talk about today is called A More Beautiful Question by Warren Bergen. And in this book, he gives us pointers for how to see things differently by asking better questions. The book personally helped me because I ask a lot of pretty dumb questions and feel a bit stupid about it. But it turns out they're often the beginning of looking at stuff really differently, and they're the seeds of innovation. So, it turns out I'm a genius, which is pretty great for me. So not really, far from it. Anyway, so yeah, the first sort of key takeaway I wanted to talk about was, yeah, if you want to do something interesting, you've got to stop accepting reality. So the genesis of every startup is, why does it have to be this way? Could it be done a different way? So if you want to do something interesting, you need to sort of question the normal way of doing stuff. And yeah, as I said before, that's kind of tough because you've got to look stupid sometimes in front of people that you want to gain respect from. So yeah, you need to start questioning pretty much everything. So the second one, just challenge the status quo by asking 3 types of questions. So why, what if, and how. And yeah, so the why question, so why is it that way? Why can't we do it another way? Why should I settle for it being done this way? And the what is, what if I did it this way? And what if I take this apart and reconstruct it? And the how is when you're sort of honing in on your solution. So how do we make this thing to change the world? And there's a really good example in the book about Polaroid. So actually the why came from the inventor's daughter. I can't quite remember his or her name, but it was like, why do we have to wait for pictures? And I don't know. Sort of like, so it's a really good question. And then they sort of said, okay, so like why do you have to do this? And say, what if you could have like a dark room inside a camera, which is what Polaroid is? And obviously that then, that had a lot of challenges, engineering challenges about it. So they said, how can we print a positive, how could we print a positive from a negative inside the back of a camera? And they've got a very ingenious little device that enables that. So they had the why, what if, and how, and that was the seed of their innovation. And the third one, which, it's really interesting for me as well, is school is designed to stop us asking questions. So I think like kids around the age of 4, their curiosity peaks, their minds are expanding, their language is getting good enough to ask really good questions. So it's like, why don't we stay that curious? And I suppose, there's stuff that happens in preschool, but when kids move through school, they begin to ask fewer and fewer questions. And the researchers in the book mainly put this down to the actual measure, the way school's measured. So schools are measured by their pupils becoming great at answers, not great at questions. So in a way, questions are beaten out of us at an early age so we can become answer machines. But it's such a shame, because I think that today, I don't know if everyone would agree, we really need people that can ask great questions, not come up with great answers. I've got Google and stuff, haven't we? So the art of asking questions can actually be encouraged and taught. Again, there's a really good example in the book. So there's a study about master questioners, and the researcher Hal Gregerson, he inquired about the childhood of that master questioner, and there was always at least one adult in their lives who encouraged them to provoke questions, so ask provocative questions. So it was Isaac Rabbi. I don't know who this guy is, but he was one such child in this study. But when he came home from school, his mother didn't ask him, did you learn anything today? Which I probably asked my kids, definitely. But instead, the question she asked was, did you ask a good question today? Which I think is a really nice way of framing it. And the final one is businesses should reward better questions, not better answers. So as Danae touched on earlier, businesses thrive on innovation. That's a really important thing today. So we need people to ask better questions and challenge the norm, but most commonly, like, employees are rewarded, like school, for good solutions rather than good questions. So the Lean Startups, Eric Ries in the book expands on this a little bit more. And his theory about this is that resources in most companies flow to the people that are with the most confident and best plan. So it's like that assuredness of the best answer, or the person with no failures on their record. But he says the solution here is just to direct more budget to the people exploring those unanswered questions, conducting promising experiments, and taking intelligent risks. And I think that's important. They're intelligent risks. It's quite radical still for most businesses, but failed experiments should be rewarded just as much as alongside proven success, which I wholly agree with. Well done, Warren. So as a summary, just to do something interesting, don't accept reality. The second one, challenge the norm, ask why, what if, and how. The third, school is designed to stop us asking questions. Encourage questioning, and not only in your kids, but just, if you're a line manager. And I feel like the author feels like businesses should start rewarding questions, not just answers. And that's me. Oh, sorry, thank you. Dr. Kate Hall.
Hey, look, I even brought a copy of the book to demonstrate. I have read this. I just randomly opened it up, stuck a Post-it note in. So yeah, apparently I kind of mindly cheated because I kind of inserted more slides, but let's see how it goes, right? It'll be fine. So the first 90 days is all about the first 90 days of a new job. And that applies whether you go to a new company or whether it's an internal promotion. And one of my favorite things about this is, so I was introduced to the book by one of my favorite people ever. And I wish she was my best friend, but she's not. She's a group chief data officer, so I work for Sainsbury's. So the Sainsbury's group chief data officer. She's awesome, called Helen Hunter. And when she learned that I was moving to my new role, she said, "Go and get this book and read it." And one of the reasons why it's one of my favorite books is it's just very information dense. It's one of those books where you can't read it in one go. You have to take it in chunks. So yeah, what's it about? It's a book about how to make an impact early on in a new role and navigate through navigate through the organization. And I find that one of the things is that often organizational politics is seen as a sort of a bit of a dirty word. People don't want to do the politics, or and especially when you're in a product management role or any role with any sort of senior leadership, you actually, or even lower than that, right? It doesn't matter. At any point, you actually have to really think about how to influence other people, right? And without understanding all of the complex human relationships, it's actually very difficult to just get your job done by being great at, coding, or being great at testing, or being great at design. You actually have to think about how you influence people. And this book actually has really good examples of how to do that. So basically, I love these diagrams, right? So no, anyway, no. Shit. What have I done? I just keep on pressing buttons, and then I just.
Oh no, you. Okay, that concludes. Fine.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. All right. Sorry. So yeah.
It's okay, man. Hey, we're back.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So the first thing I learned about this is set yourself milestones for value delivery. That I took from the book anyway, and especially when it came to that internal promotion, because I was in the organization already, and you don't necessarily do the onboarding things that one would do, right? But when you're stepping into that new role, it's really important whether you've just been made from a designer to a senior designer, or you're moving teams. It's that point of kind of getting your head into a mindset of, right, okay, what am I doing at the end of the first day? What do I need to deliver by the end of the first week? What does that end of first month look like? And it makes sense when you're entering into a new organization, but when you're promoting, when you're within the same organization, it's really useful to have those set deadlines as well. So really think about what you need to have done by the end of the second month. Second thing is know what you need to know that you need to own negotiating success with your boss. And I really like this. So I sometimes struggle in one-to-ones, right? To not just either bring my laundry list of things that I'm going to do, or a pile of problems that I'm facing right now. And when it's like, how do you take from what you're doing to actually turning it around and thinking about strategically, how do I think about that high level? So in the book, they talk about, well, these are the 5 conversations that you should have fairly early on with your boss. Number 1, what's the situation? How do they see the situation in the company? And more importantly, how do they see you contributing to that success, right? Expectations, what are you expected to accomplish within, that success or that plan? What resources do you have? Is that financial? Is that technical support? Is it expertise? What do you think you need, right? And what are the kind of no-go areas? Style, how do you work best together? So in terms of decision making, they mentioned, Michael Watkins mentions adapting to your boss's style, and having that discussion early on about fit. And then last being personal development. So if you are stepping into a new role, generally, there are a new set of things that you will be doing, right? Make sure that you get early feedback in order to develop that. And what I found is that not only was this useful right at the start, but actually every quarter, right? How, has the situation changed? Has the expectations of me changed? And especially in a situation where, we've just moved to quarterly business reviews, right? So the kind of quarterly OKRs that, free agent used to have. And it's almost that negotiation every time. And I really like it. Third is action is not always best in the early days. Put time in to learn the history, challenges, and opportunities. So if you're like me and you like getting stuff done, you're like, yeah, I'm in there, I'm gonna do stuff. And then you realize that you might be doing the wrong things. That's not cool. So early on, one of the examples of the book is a test manager called Chris. And Chris basically was moving from a fairly modern, technology-driven organization into a head of testing role in a, slightly more old-fashioned organization. And he basically went in and said, okay, yeah, we need to do a lot more work. Brought in consultants, said, right, this is the gold standard. Now I'm going to change everything. And then, within a month, morale plummeted, right? And it was really difficult. And the feedback to him was, you need to listen, right? So it's all about how do you take time to actually understand the situation you're in before you make big steps. So these are, again, the 5 questions that they offer to ask. So what are the biggest challenges that the organization is facing? So the Michael Watkins, the author, recommends that you spend time talking to people across the entire, across your immediate kind of vicinity around these questions. So why is the organization facing these challenges? What's the most promising unexploited opportunities for growth? What would need to happen in order for the organization to exploit the potential of these opportunities? And if you were me, what would you focus your energy on, right? And to be honest, even though these are in the context of the first time you walk into a role, actually, again, this is something that you could be talking to every day. Fourth, create alliances, understand the influences that will help you be more effective. So yeah, this is kind of scary, right? Again, one of the examples in the book is about someone who's just taken on a sort of much bigger role and thinking about how to, so she went in, asked all of the questions, got an understanding, called a big town hall meeting and presented this big plan, and was then met with quite a lot of skepticism and upset people. And one of the things in the book was talking about, well, you don't have to influence everyone, but there are key people that you need to influence. And by the way, I mean, this is a real struggle, right? So you've got really big design decision or really big strategic decision coming up. Is about saying, well, who's the final decision maker, and who does the decision maker get influenced by? And generally it's 1 or 2 people, right? So how do you get them on side so that when you have a chat with the actual person, that the other people in the room are nodding and they're being trusted? So I find it really hard, because it's a lot of really hard work. But if you want to get anything major done, I tend to find that you have to have that skill set. And lastly, secure early wins by delivering change in waves. This is really fascinating, right? So again, I'm one of these people who are like, yeah, do stuff, do, right? And what the author recommends is actually, if you look, there's almost these stages where you say, right, I think I know enough now. I'm going to almost store up a bunch of changes, make those changes, right, and calm down again. Let's have a look, reassess, did all that work well? Okay, great. What's the next step? And like build that up. So it's almost iterative change over time, which I think is really fascinating as well. Again, it helps, I think, to think about how you package stuff up so that you can make that impact and be able to visibly see that impact over time. Cool. So yeah. So to summarize, number one, yeah. By the way, I can't get these lines. I tried. Right? So I'm owning my success by saying that's normal. Set yourself milestones for value delivery. Know your boss. Know that you need to own negotiating success with your boss. Action is not always better in the early days. Really learn. Create alliances. Talk to people. Understand the influences. And secure early wins. There you go. Cool. I think
We've still got time.
we still got time.
Have you still got time?
Yeah, we still got time.
Yeah, we just have a few minutes if you want to ask mainly Danae and Kate some questions. That'd be great. Yeah, so just to review that, Danae talks about what's it called again?
The fearless organization.
Fearless organization. Kate about sorry. Yeah, I talked to the people, more people questions. So yeah, I don't know if anyone has any questions.
I've got a question that's for you. Just to yourself about the 5 things to ask as a new member of staff if you're coming in. Would that work the other way? So if you've got a new manager starting, can you ask them those questions as well about what you expect, where you hope to be with that?
Yeah, definitely. And then you can also ask them, so can you let me know what your success criteria is and then that kind of completely lines up, right? So yeah, completely. I think that's one of the most important conversations to have constantly. What you expect it to do.
I'm going to do that in an hour, so thanks.
Yeah, good.
I'll let you know how it goes.
That's brilliant, just in time for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Got a question is for everyone really. It's like when do you like to read? Have you consciously set aside time to read material like this so you can prepare for like large changes in work or stuff?
Yeah, I read this book last night. Yeah, actively chosen to become more of an active reader. So I set myself a challenge 3 years ago just to read 24 books a year, so it's like every 2 weeks, and then try and take like key takeaways from there, sort of roughly remember stuff. So it's not setting aside time, but it's like blocks of time just to try and get through a book. And yeah, it's worked really well for me. Really struggled to get through all the stuff I wanted to read. But yeah, 3 years for over like 8 books or something.
I tend to go in waves. So during oh shit periods, I read a lot, and then I kind of give it time to consolidate, and then I go through another oh shit period and I read a lot again. I find it's when there's something in front of me, I always kind of look for a framework to help me solve that thing that's in front of me. So then I start kind of almost mind sweeping different books, and I'll order like 10 books and then start kind of like scanning through them all to just try and pull together an approach for kind of whatever problem that I've got. But I do set aside, like I do read in one place, and actually I've got little index cards. I'm so old school. I read a thing about active reading, and this guy had a really good index card system. So I take my kind of key takeaways, I put them on an index card, and then I scan them in. I use some scan thing on my phone so that I've always kind of got my cards with me. So then it's like, oh wait, I know what situation I'm in. There's a framework for that, and then I can just kind of pull it up on my phone. But yeah, I'm just constantly in search of frameworks when I read.
I'm trying to encourage you to document. It's really a good system for active reading, but you should put it somewhere.
Yeah, I will blog about it eventually.
Yeah, I think similar in that. I think when there's a situation, I'll just go find a batch of books. But this is a great point where we should pitch the library. You know, there's Fountain Bridge Library just along the canal. It's awesome. There's loads of them. I used to think there's who's that really old stock, but they actually have really, really good up-to-date books. So you should go and get a library card go and, because it's free, it's amazing. So do that. But yeah, I try.
My question for today is about the psychological safety talk. I wonder if if you do all you can to make an organisation feel psychologically safe, you still got this problem that people who come from organisations that weren't psychologically safe would have this kind of like bad habit of psychological paranoia.
Yeah.
I wonder, is there any ways to break through that, or is it kind of?
I find that there's a deprogramming period that you kind of have to build into that. And it's funny because I've hired not being aware of that, and then I have hired seeing it and being aware of it. And in both cases, I found that a bit of a come to Jesus talk was kind of necessary. And well, sorry, I'm American. Come to Jesus talk is like a, like let's sit down and like everything's going well. Let's sit down and really talk about what's going on here.
Yeah.
And like there's behavior that we're not expecting to see. And actually, in both cases, or in all cases, I think the thing that you really need to kind of reiterate to people, because they don't believe you, how they say, like, you have to say something 7 times before someone really believes you. I think you have to really, truly explain to them and demonstrate to them that they're safe. And I think that's something that can only happen over like 3-6 months. And so as a manager, you have to watch that quite carefully. But I think saying, you are safe, I believe in you, it's okay, I need you to come to me with things that you think aren't going well, and actually demonstrating through your line management that, okay, like I've done before in the past, like bring me every week, bring me something that you didn't understand, but you didn't want to say. And then you sit down and you just normalize that, make it just tiny little bits of safety as you go, and you demonstrate each time, their learned experience. It's like cognitive behavioral therapy. Their learned experience is that they are safe, and then you can just slowly deprogram them, which is, it's work, but that's kind of what line managers are supposed to do anyway. But it's actually so valuable because, as you say, you're contributing back to the kind of culture of that company, and then they'll pass that on to the next people that they work with, which I've also seen, and it's a real gift back to everybody else.
Yeah, there's also the other way around as well. If you use the psychologically safe place, and then you can go into an organisation which isn't.
Oh yeah, that's hell.
No solution.
Well, no, it's basically that's a real example of boundary setting where you're just kind of like, this is absolutely unacceptable, and I need to feel like I'm safe here, and yeah, I've been in that as well, and it's just. It's much harder because if the whole company is one way and you're the other way, you can build your little pockets of safety. But like that's why I really emphasize that the team can be safe, but the company necessarily doesn't have to be. And that's, you do see that, I think, in different organizations where you've got little pockets of safety, but it's not consistent. And then I think it's, I hope you have an ear in the leadership team.
Hi, I'm Siobhan. So based on what you read in your books, is there any practical changes that you've made personally or for your team?
So I thought the part that I took away the most was the last 2 slides of mine, which was the explain the urgency and the context. So I actually think a lot of what being a team lead is in any modern business is actually setting and resetting context over and over, and just helping to explain to people and helping them kind of explain back to you where they are, and saying, okay, well, we did this and it didn't work, but that's okay. Here's where we are now, and here's what we've learned. Or remember, we're not supposed to know all of the answers. And that was really good. It kind of maybe took me from a 4 to a 10 in that work, and actually I've seen that work really well, especially Victoria and I work in a really fast-paced startup. And actually the context changes every 20 minutes, it feels like. And so actually just knowing that my job is to reset that context and help people feel safe. And safe, by the way, is not nice. Safe is not without conflict. Safe is literally, I can have conflict safely. So that's probably the key thing that I've taken away and applied. And that idea of intelligent failure and not treating complex failure like preventable failure. I think we all fall into that trap ourselves and as managers and team leads.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I think I come from the almost exactly that kind of train of thought, but on the other side. So what happens if you don't have an enlightened manager like the Michelle? Right? And then, and it may be a bit harder to get that context out. So I think that's That's what I've tried to do. Where when we talk about one-to-ones, often a lot of the literature basically says like it's your time, the boss, right? It's your time to kind of talk about what you've been up to, and what you've been doing. And more, I've sort of almost divided my time to say, right, here's what I'm up to. However, can we spend half of that time talking about what you think the situation is? Where is the company going? So similar to at the moment, there's a lot of complex changes happening where I am, and it's almost too. Number one, you're just not in the room all the time, right? And I'm sure any of you who work in that kind of situation, you're not in leadership teams all the time. So part of your world is how do you understand what they're thinking and what's important to them in order to kind of translate that back into changing what you're going to do. So like the active change that I've made is splitting more time to understand what's happening in the organization, and therefore how value there is defined, because you're never going to get your next promotion or your next chunky project without understanding where that value is. Yeah.
We're going to finish up there.
You haven't answered the question.
Oh, I changed nothing in my life. But yeah, well, thanks so much for today. Hopefully you learned a couple of things, maybe even inspired to pick up these books as well. Yeah, if this wasn't a total and utter shambles, we'll hopefully do this again. I personally learned quite a lot there, so that's helpful to me. But yeah, thanks so much for getting up early and coming along. Hopefully you're super pumped for the rest of the day with all this wonderful knowledge. Pastries left, have a coffee, and yeah, thanks so much.